Alright, so let's just acknowledge up front that of every franchise movie series that exists as a thing right now, the Shazam property is probably the one that got fucked hardest by pandemic delays in the most obvious, tangible way. I mean, here was the only superhero thing Warner Brothers had managed to be both good and successful, more or less removed, but not like totally removed from the god-awful mess that the rest of the studio made of the DC Universe stuff between Man of Steel and ongoing, pretty much. All primed up to do its own thing and maybe even march forward as a standard bearer, but then everything had to get delayed, which was bad for all filmmaking, but especially bad for any momentum you could be hoping to build off a property that's so reliant on being a breezy, not too light, not too serious, so the parts that are serious hit harder, and also hinges a huge part of its premise on the main cast of characters being kids half the time for emotional and humorous narrative contrast, and child actors grow up. So, not great circumstances for something that really felt like it was being primed and ready to spit out just a whole run of fine stories, and instead had to sit on its hands while both its parent company and the world got its act back together, and in the meantime your studio falls apart twice. The DCEU finally falls apart completely, and your lead actor has time to remind everyone he's kind of a douchebag. So now the sequel is coming out, not counting Black Adam, because I guess we're just not. It definitely doesn't come up here. Has to come out in this weird miasma space where everyone knows the entire DC media brand is this hovering zombie waiting around for a Flash movie that also probably won't be good, but at least we're getting Michael Keaton again to come out and officially delete a decade of hot Marthaverse garbage so we can all try again at this. And in the meantime, Shazam 2 is left sitting out here in the question mark space as an actually pretty good sequel. Didn't mean to bury the lead there, but yeah, it kind of makes it more sad in a way. If it were a bad movie, it'd be just another Warner Brothers DC fail to add to the pile of this is why we had to throw this shit out and move on. But the fact that Fury of the Gods is merely a good but not as good as the first one follow-up that would have been fine if it had come out a year or two after part one, but mostly feels like a that's all after the wait and build up, and most of that's not really the fault of a good but only just good movie, really kinda sucks. Like, if this were the last Shazam movie they were to make in this specific incarnation, no spoilers here as to whether or not it leaves room or not, go see it for yourselves, and then like someday in the future people were to watch these two movies back to back on a weekday context free, I have to imagine the reaction would be, man, those were fun, why didn't they do more of this? It was just getting going. But yeah, for now, the original movie I genuinely love. It's probably the best of the DC Extended Universe movies overall at this point. The sequel is one I genuinely like. It's got a lot of the same things I liked in the first one, not genuinely expanded much on, but still very much utilized. The second act is kind of flabby, but it finishes very strong, and there's a few payoffs to the emotional beats from the original that are highly appreciated. When it works, it works. It's enough. So story-wise, picking up from the last time, foster kid Billy Batson has been imbued by the wizard Shazam with the ability to transform into an adult-sized superhero who's still working out his name because that's a good running gag by saying a magic word, an ability he since shared with his adopted siblings to form a surrogate family super team that protects the city of Philadelphia, but mostly protects Billy's still crippling fears of abandonment, which are starting to re-emerge since he's approaching the age where he'll age out of the system and is struggling with what might come next, putting tension onto the team as he's increasingly about cohesion while the others are trying to be more independent. I'm not really sure that this needed that much more story tension. I mean, your movie is already about little foster kids who turn into adult superheroes. I feel like maybe that would have been enough for a movie that kind of has both too much and not enough narrative, but okay. This all gets upended by Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu as the daughters of Atlas, ancient Greek goddesses who claim rightful ownership of the powers of the heroes and are our villains this time, and they want to use it to revive their world and abilities, etc. Their whole thing is kind of a boilerplate, generic bad guy stuff until it isn't, and there's kind of an interesting wrinkle to the way their dynamic plays out that I guess required it to feel generic bad guy stuff-ish at first, but it takes a while getting there. Eventually there's a bunch of monsters on the loose, some betrayals, chances for Jaimin Hansu to pop back in as Shazam. It drags a little bit in the middle trying to buff up a romance subplot that just doesn't really hit, but Act 3 is really good, if also very familiar stuff. I don't know, maybe I was predisposed to look for the good in this one because I liked the first so much and felt bad that the filmmakers got screwed by COVID, and I deeply resent the incredibly poisoned logic of, well, why should people bother with this? It might get erased from continuity and then won't matter. And guys, none of the continuity bullshit matters. This is all made up. It's fucking fiction. If the movie is good, it's still good whether it goes in the lore guide or not. Fuck off with that shit. But regardless, I'm glad to be able to say that even if I didn't come out of it as elevated as I was about the original, I thought it was still a lot of fun, and I do recommend it. And not just because I'd like to see them keep going with this. 7 out of 10, give it a chance.